Welcome, my name is Nick, and this is Nick's Fort, and today I'm going to share with you guys how to organize your edit like a professional. And I know a lot of times you might look online and learn how to do some cool transitions and stuff like that, but today we're going to get down to the foundation, a core of how to be a professional editor and how to organize your edit. And this is super, super important. If you want to learn how to be a pro, if you want to do things the right way, this is a foundational thing for editing, and it's actually like way more important than cool effects and stuff like that. So I hope you stick around for that. We're doing the live stream. I have my friend Gabby here. She's sitting over there. She'll be here in a second, and I will share the story of working with her. She is a professional editor, lived in New York City for a long time. She came out to Oregon, did a project together. She blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, I gotta share this with you guys because I was doing it wrong for sure. We're gonna let people come into the live stream here. I think we've got a couple of people here now. So if you are tuning in after the fact, then I will leave a timestamp below to when we actually start the tutorial, so you don't have to stick around for this Q&A in the beginning. We're gonna talk with Gabby. I'm gonna answer some of your questions. So if you're in the chat, you can drop a question and we'll answer that. I would stick around. It's probably going to be valuable, but if you don't want to, you can skip ahead with that timestamp below. So I'm going to have Gabby come in here now. I've got the little I get the little standby thing right here. I don't know how to get rid of that, so that's good. So this is Gabby. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
My name's Gabby. I guess about my background, I lived in New York City for 10 years and worked as a professional editor for 6. I mostly work on branded content and documentary stuff. And yeah, I've worked with clients like Vice and New York Times, and Google's a really big client of mine. Yeah, and some other people.
Cool. Cool. Can you guys hear us both okay? I put a lav on her, so hopefully you can hear her pretty well. And then we have another mic up here. Let us know if you can't hear us that well. So you worked in New York City. And were you freelancing the whole time just doing editing?
Yeah, so the first job that I had as an editor was kind of like more permalance. So I was at the same company pretty consistently for like 4 years. And then I traveled to Alaska and to Portland for a documentary I was editing. And then when I came back, I just did freelance on my own, kind of like with a couple of other clients.
So how long have you been editing professionally?
Or
actually, how long have you been editing and then editing professionally? So like how long has it been?
Well, I went to film school, but I actually didn't take any editing classes in film school.
Okay.
The first thing I edited was this documentary I made when I was doing a study abroad program in Cuba. And I made this little documentary about a little boy who's like a pianist, and I edited that, and I thought it was really fun, but I literally knew nothing about editing. But I think I had good instincts, and then I just got really lucky and got a great job that was able to, with a boss that was able to mentor me, and I learned a lot from that.
So again, it's important to note that like everyone starts somewhere, and like you edited something, you didn't know anything.
Oh
and
yeah,
you loved it.
And I mean, even looking back at like the stuff that, like how I used to edit when I first started editing, you know, like I've come so far. I've definitely put in like 10,000 hours of editing for sure.
And I think that it's also important to remember that, you know, I've been doing this a long time, and I do a lot of different things. So I film, direct, edit, and I play a lot of different roles. But at the same time, there's always room to learn. So when I just did, Gabby and I just did a film together for the Music Bed Challenge, and she had moved here, and I was like, oh, we should do a project together. And this is the first time we worked together, and when I sat down with her and she edited this piece, I was like, shit, like I need to learn from her how to become a better editor. And I know you guys have learned a lot from me, but that doesn't mean that I'm not continuing to learn on my own and grow. And I'm sure that like you can say the same for yourself as you keep working. You're like, there's always room to learn.
Oh, totally. Like you were showing me all the like essential graphic stuff that I had never even used in Premiere for so long. But yeah, you can always learn.
Nice. So if you guys have any questions right now, Gabby's a super experienced editor. Drop them in the chat. I can see a couple of you guys over there. We'll answer those questions, and let me just see how long it's been. It's probably been like 5 minutes, so we're probably gonna keep chatting here for another 5 minutes, and then we're gonna get into how to organize your edit. And also, if you guys want to follow along, I know that Mike had dropped a comment about some footage that he has. There's a link below in the comments that goes to my website where you can download the template. And the template is going to be like a folder structure, and it's also going to be an actual Premiere Pro file, right? So you could like
as a template,
work through your own project at the same time as us, which would be pretty cool. And if you're watching this after the fact, you can also go download that. It's free. It's free, so you can go get that on my website. And Gabby made that, so thank you so much for sharing that with everyone. That is super, super valuable.
I always wish I had one of those. So
right?
Yeah, I had to this is like a mixture of me creating it and then using someone else's. That was like exactly what I was looking for.
I have one, and I made a video about it a year ago, and it's like, I'm embarrassed. Like, don't go watch that video, because like it's like such like garbage compared to this workflow. So again, there's always room to keep improving. So go get that; it's free. But yeah, so let me I know we're not going to talk about. We're going to talk about structure and like the nitty gritty mechanics of like organization, right? And maybe I'm putting you on the spot here, but maybe we have a couple minutes. I would like to hear your thoughts on your thoughts on like storytelling when it comes to editing and the value of that versus the mechanics of being able to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like one of my greater strengths as an editor. Is storytelling, and I think like as an editor you become almost the writer in documentaries, at least, of the movie a lot of times. And like sure, you're working with the director, and a lot of times the director has a really strong vision, but a lot of times in my experience it's been producers will just hand you a bunch of footage and the transcripts, and it's kind of your job, and there'll be like a brief or something, but it's your job to like bring these characters to life and make people feel empathetic towards them. And really like a lot of that comes from just digging through transcripts of interviews and like just trying different things and putting them together. And I feel like we were talking about this in the documentary we made together, where it's like I feel like every time there's always this wall that you hit when you're going through the radio edit process. And like because the first step that I always take is like building out the structure based on just the audio if it's going to be like an interview-based film.
Let me interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
Can you explain what a radio edit is?
Yeah, so the radio edit is basically what it sounds like. So like it's basically what you would hear on the radio, right? So it's the story in audio form essentially.
And that's kind of step one for building a story for you.
For me, yeah. That's kind of how I go about it. Is like I'll go through the transcripts and that are based off of the interviews if it's an interview-based story. And usually most documentaries have an interview to kind of like glue everything together. So I'll start with that and kind of try to build a story around that. And usually it changes, and I think it's really important not to get super hung up on having that be perfect.
Yeah.
Because like the most important thing is really to just get that in place, and then you can kind of tweak it and add in some verite scenes and with like in-scene conversation.
Stop you again.
Yeah.
Verite.
So verite is sort of like just a scene as it unfolds, like as if you were watching it like a fly on the wall.
Sure.
So like if characters have organic conversation on camera, things that you wouldn't necessarily transcribe, that you're gonna actually have to like watch through and make selects.
Right.
And that's my favorite type of editing. It's very time consuming because you have to make cuts based off of whatever the person shot. It's not necessarily like a shot list.
Yeah.
But I think that also makes it a little more creative and a little more fun.
Totally. So as we go, if you guys have any questions about terminology, because Gabby is talking as an editor right now, and I know that she's dropping a lot of terms that you may or may not know. So please don't be shy in the comments. Like if you don't know what a term is, like either ask us or Google it. Like not a big deal. Like and I will try to frequently stop her and like go a little deeper on these little things. And to reiterate what you just said, I think that style of doing a radio edit, so let's say you have your footage, you filmed your interviews, you filmed your B-roll, and this could work for a vlog, this could work for client work. You make the edit with just the interview content, so what people are saying, and if it's a vlog...
And don't worry about the B-roll.
Yeah, the B-roll
first.
doesn't matter at this point. You put your story together based on, like let's say you go do a vlog and you put your story together based on what you said to camera, and then you make that really tight and make it make sense. Then you put your B-roll over top of that.
And to cover the cuts, and like you can also, tighten things up after you have the B-roll in place so that, you know, you can make it a little shorter and tighter, and that can be helpful too.
Yeah, so I think that's how I work also in terms of like the structure of my edit workflow, and that's a really efficient way to do it, and it's definitely like a more appropriate. Yeah, you might have a sequence that you're like super stoked on this B-roll with music and stuff, but like to tell a good story, you have to have that foundation of.
Without
like,
a good story, like video is nothing. You know, I mean, like.
That's going on Twitter.
I mean, yeah, it's super, super important, and like I think it's really easy to get hung up on being like a really flashy editor and you know, making all these cool cuts and montages, which is awesome, and I think that's definitely important and can add to a story, but like really thinking about the purpose of why you're doing something, so like using slow motion footage appropriately instead of just because it looks cool, or like you know, like just not having a montage for the sake of a montage. Try and have that like tell a part of the story, or like why, just think about like why it's there. And like if you have a good story, then you can put all these flashy cuts in, like, and it will just make it that much better, you know.
Totally.
It will like add to the film instead of just relying on those cuts, I guess.
And I mean that's something that I share with you guys a lot, is like using stuff with intention and creating with intention. And even in that, like myself being super aware of that and doing that, working with Gabby was awesome, because in our collaboration, she further checked me into that realm where I'm like, oh, like, let's put some slow motion in this section. And she's like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, why would we do that? And then, you know, we debate back and forth and we find like the spot where it's appropriate. Like we did that in that film with, there's a shot of like our subject putting makeup on in his eye and it goes to slow-mo, and it worked out well, but it was like we debated whether it was like, it wasn't going to further the story, right?
Yeah.
Did it make that moment more impactful, or did it just, was it just
Look
because
cool.
it's cool? Yeah, right. So it's, you know, that's super important. And I have a couple questions. Let's see. Hey Dan, how's it going, man? So Dan and I are buddies. He lives in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I don't know direct connection or network-based storage.
So I think he's talking about like whether I use a server or whether I just like go directly into hard drive. And I've done both. A lot of times, like I don't have a server because I just don't have the funds to have a server, and I don't really like have huge projects going on consistently enough to make it worth investing in. But you know, like there are smaller, like what I would suggest for like a home edit system is, if you can afford it, like getting like a Pegasus RAID system. Like they usually have like a few bays, and that's really helpful because if anything happens to one of your hard drives on those, do you think like people are familiar with like RAID systems?
I think so. And if you're not,
okay.
you can definitely Google the RAID thing. We're not digging into that.
Yeah, but anyway, so like I think like ideally that would be what you would use for like a home edit system, and then always back up everything like 3 times and put it in different places.
So for at the end of this, I'll drop a link below to that system so you guys can check it out.
So it's called the Pegasus RAID system. But honestly, right now, like I just moved to Portland. I'm using just like a pretty cheap, like I think it's like a Seagate or something.
I saw it. It's pretty cheap.
Yeah, it's super cheap. Like not my ideal situation,
Yeah.
but like it works. And I think that like the most important thing is to get something with like a fast hard drive, so like at least 7,200 RPM.
Sure.
What is it?
Yeah, RPMs. Yeah, Revs per minute or whatever.
And so like that's the important thing to look up, and then like it'll be fine. You know, like you don't need to spend a ton of money to have like a crazy system.
No. Okay, so we got a couple more questions, and then we're going to get into this actual organization tutorial. So Eric asked, did you use one editing software only, or switched over time depending on projects?
So I actually started on Final Cut 7.
Same with me.
Yeah, and that was awesome. Actually, I think I started on 6 or something. But after 7, like my personal opinion is just like it turned a little too like iMovie-ish for me, and like that's when I switched over to Premiere, and I've been editing on Premiere since like 2013 or something. I don't know, for a while. And I think it's awesome that they do the cloud-based system now, because I remember that being a huge thing with Final Cut, was like you had to drop like $500 every time they came out with a new thing, and like now there's always like updates and like patches, and that's been super, and it's only getting better. So I love the Adobe systems.
Me too. I'm a big Adobe
And they
fan.
all connect together.
Yeah.
Like, it's useful.
Yeah. I did a similar path where I think I actually used Premiere like way back when I was like
Really?
super young. Like in high school, I edited this film. It was called Whole or Nothing. It was about drinking milk and drinking whole or nothing. It was so ridiculous. But anyways, like I cut it on Premiere, like a very, very early version of Premiere. And then, I went to school, learned on Final Cut, and then went to VH1 and I learned how to use Avid a little bit.
I've always wanted to learn Avid.
Yeah.
It's like a totally different...
The way that you, sitting with Gabby and the way that she edited reminded me of the editors that I worked with at VH1 who used Avid. Your workflow feels very similar to their workflow on Avid, which is interesting. But it's very keyboard based on what I remember. Like not a lot of mouse stuff, or most of the editors I knew didn't do mouse stuff.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Premiere Pro after Final Cut switched over, same reason. And I love Premiere.
Yeah, because I remember it used to be such a pain. Like in Final Cut, you had to if you ever wanted to do effects in After Effects, like you had to export like a whole thing. And then you also had to make everything ProRes, and like it was like, yeah. Game changer.
Terrible. So then let's see, John from Greece. Awesome, man. Where's everyone tuning in from? So if you're watching this right now, drop in the comments in the chat where you're tuning in from. I'm always super stoked to see people around the world tuning in, which is super cool. Anyways, John's from Greece. How important is the music for the edit? Is there a rough guideline about how we edit based on tempo or other sound, melody, peaks? I mean, I think that's a super interesting question because I feel like there's different schools of thought related to music.
Yeah, and I was just telling you that I've recently been trying this new thing. So like before, this last project or maybe 2 projects ago, I started doing this new way of like handling music. But prior to that, I would do my radio edit, and then I would start looking for music, right? And like try and build emotion into the story at that point in the edit, like after just laying down like the interview bites and having like a story. But recently I've been trying this new thing where I don't put music in until after I've kind of put in the general B-roll. And I think that's really interesting because then you're allowing the footage to kind of inform the emotion first without like preemptively putting a stamp on how the viewer should feel with a song, right? It's playing to the idea of the whole thing about like intention, right? I mean, like allowing the story to speak for itself is going to be way stronger than using any crutch of like fancy edits or like good music or anything like that. So I think it's been kind of a cool way of doing it. I think I'll probably stick to that, and maybe like do a little bit of both to kind of like get a feel for it. But
I love that. I love that, and I think that there's a pervasive it's pervasive in our culture, the use of like fancy edits to music to like get people's attention without intention, and it drives me freaking crazy.
Yeah.
But I also think that doing what you're doing and doing it first without the music is probably super challenging, and I'm gonna start doing that myself, and I challenge you guys to do that too. And I think with time, if you get better at that, then your stuff's going to be that much better at like the core, where people will watch it and they might not be able to say, I understand why this feels better, but it feels better than this other thing that's more like surface, And I
think also it allows you to let stuff breathe. So not everything needs to have music. Like, it's okay to not have music behind the scene and let the scene speak for itself. And I think that is not done enough. Like, even in my own work, like, I find a lot of clients, like, just love to paste music from, like, beginning to end. Sure. And sometimes there's just not room for some silence and some breath. But I think whenever you can do that, it's, like, just allow it. And I think, like, doing the music last kind of allows you to see what it looks like without music. And you're like, oh, maybe it doesn't need music for this scene.
And I love that too. Like I'm a big fan of the actual sounds of the environment.
Totally.
Like that can be so like, especially like for
keep your natural sound.
For
sure.
It can sound super cool. So I've been actually thinking about incorporating that more into my content for this channel and like doing less music underneath for the sake of music underneath and just having the sound.
Yeah, and it's okay. And it can feel empty, but like it's okay. If you have a good story, it's gonna speak for itself.
Yeah, awesome. So I think we should get into it. We got some people from around the world: Canada, France, Germany. That's awesome. Greece. So we're gonna dig into this. Hey Josh, how's it going, man? We are gonna look at how to organize your edit, and I'm gonna switch over to a desktop view here. So just bear with me, and we will be in that bottom corner, as you can see. And I'm gonna swap seats with Gabby so she can get into this project. And actually, here, let me. I'm gonna swap back real quick so I can clean up all these other windows.
Also, you guys have to bear with me because this is a Windows computer and the keyboard is totally different. So it's going to be interesting.
Give us 1 second. So I guess I should probably close this project, right? You're gonna start a new one.
Sure, we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
You just have to show me where you put the proxies if you need proxies.
All right. So here's what I'll do. Is I'm gonna take your template and put it in this folder.
Okay.
And then this is the project with all the files, and then this is your template, so you can just go from there. Does that work?
Sure.
Okay. I'll minimize that. Okay, cool. So we're gonna swap seats here.
All right. Okay, so usually what I would do is I have my template here, right? And I would, oh my God, I don't even know how to like duplicate things. Oh no, where'd it go?
Wait, hit Control Z. I'm gonna have to help you.
How do you
So,
duplicate it?
right click it and then hit copy, I guess, and then
Oh,
paste.
I can just copy and paste it.
Yeah. Like Gabby said, she uses a Mac all the time, so you're gonna have to like, remember that as we go through here.
I swear to God, I'm much faster than this. Okay, so usually the way I would name my projects is like I would put client first. So like say for this example, we'll do like Nix Fort, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that way, if you have like multiple videos that you're doing for the same client, like all your clients will be grouped together by name on your server or on your hard drive or wherever you keep your
Kind of like
project.
how I have Timberland in front of those two.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's for truth, like those are. I didn't do that on purpose, but.
But that's exactly right.
Sure.
And then, so I would start with that, and then I would just do the name of the project. Alvord Desert 2019. Perfect.
Cool.
And then, can I just make like a new window, open in a new
Window. Yep.
Oh my
She's
God.
learning.
Just saying, I feel so old with technology. Okay, so if someone gave me like a project that already has stuff happening in it, and maybe like, I would go into whatever they have and just sort of like put it into what I like it to be as. So like, I set up my project as you can see, there's like all these different folders here, and the first thing I would do is put the footage where I want it. So I would put the raw stuff in here, and this is great because Nick has put it into 2 folders by the camera, which is awesome. And then the only thing I would say is like if you shot on multiple days, so you did. Mm-hmm. Usually I would do it by date and then camera.
So why don't you go? You can go ahead and do that then, so we can see what that looks like.
Let's take this out then. Okay, so yeah, oh my God. New folder.
There you go.
So you shot on 704, and what are the things before it? 164, 165?
That's just the way that the Canon labels a folder. It's irrelevant.
Okay. So I would do always.
But the date is the July 4th and July 5th.
So I like to categorize my stuff by year first, and then by month, and then by date. And the reason for that is just like if you have a project that goes over the span of like multiple years, which you're like, maybe that will never happen, but like, hey, maybe you start your project in December, and then all of a sudden it's a new year, and you want everything to be like always in chronological order. So if you had like, you know, if you don't do the year first, then like if it comes 2020, like all of your 2020 stuff is going to be categorized by the month and not by the year, and that's going to be really confusing and weird. So I always like to do the year first.
Yeah, so what she just said, make sure that if you don't understand that, rewatch that section, because it's super important. Because if you're going from December to January, and it's not by year, it's going to be super confusing. That was something that I had not thought of and didn't do. Valuable tip right there.
So then you have. Oh my God, it's gonna take so long. See, 200, and then I would do by camera, right? Yeah, so we can just drag all of them here. Man, it drives me crazy not being able to do things quickly.
I believe you.
I know you do, huh? All right. Okay. And then...
Mike just dropped you the shortcut for making a new folder.
What is it?
Control-Shift-N.
Control Shift. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're gonna learn how to use a PC by the end of this live stream.
I know. All right, and then.
So there
do
are
you
proxy
see
files in there, as you can see.
Oh, you put them in.
It just builds it into where they are. So you're gonna
Yeah,
need
so
to
you
move
can
those.
change that, and that's like I would just make it go to like the proxy folder.
Sure.
Yeah.
With your workflow, you have a folder for that.
Yep.
But just so you know, they're in there.
Wait, there's none for the C200.
No, I didn't.
Right?
I didn't have time for
Okay,
that. Or actually,
cool.
it would be baked into the. There might be one inside of one of those. Go to the fourth, and then see if inside of there there's a inside of there. Proxies.
Yay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're gonna have to move those.
It's on this one.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, guys. Oh, man. And, okay, so basically for the proxy folders, you want them to be labeled exactly like your raw, but then it's going to say proxies at the end, so that's how you know the difference. But I think it's really helpful to have different folders for your proxies.
Yeah, I definitely have always done different folders for my proxies. And guys, if you want to follow along, there is a link for the template in the pinned comment, and I will also drop one in the chat. And the template is free. It's on my website, and you can download that. It's going to have the folder structure, and it's also going to have the Premiere profile, which we will get to shortly. I'm going to drop it in the chat just now, so you guys can go pick that up if you want.
And like a lot of this might seem like over organization, but honestly, like it will just save you time in the end. Yeah, so like setting up your project is usually done by an assistant. Sometimes you have to set it up yourself. Like I do still have to set up my project quite a bit, but like that's where I've learned most of this workflow from, is from like working with assistants who have set it up beautifully, and that is the best feeling ever.
And for a lot of you guys out there, and for me, I do a lot of solo filmmaking stuff, and I do a lot of stuff with clients where I'm the only person start to finish. So I'm filming it, I'm cutting it, and in that case, you're gonna have to go through this workflow. And I think that it might be tedious and it might be a lot in the beginning, but at the end of the day, when a client reaches out to you a month later, a year
That's
later,
really when it comes in the most handy.
it's gonna be valuable.
Seriously. Like there's no way to reiterate how handy that is, because like and like especially when we get into it later, like just organizing everything by date will just save you so much time down the line. 704, and then we have the drone. Thank you for that shortcut.
There you go, Mike. She took the shortcut. So yeah, I mean, I often have that happen when a client will reach out to me multiple times over years and ask for a project from years before. And actually, like for example, I do a lot of stuff with Truth, and about a year ago they reached out about doing this recap video of footage from everything that I filmed with them, and that goes back 9-10 years. And if I had been doing this from the beginning, I would have been like, wow, this is super easy, and like, yeah, I totally can do it. But like for me, I was like where is everything? What am I gonna do? Like, and like it was terrifying. So if you are just starting out, holy shit, like you definitely need to do
I
this.
remember looking for something like this when I first started editing and like could not find anything. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a game changer. I don't think we need the year for this in the project name. So so when you're naming your project, I would name it the exact same thing as the folder, basically, and then you're just gonna throw on the date at the end. And then you'll notice here that I have like an archive folder. And so like part of my process is every day when I sit down to edit, like each new day, I make a copy of the project and change the date, like update it, and then throw the old one in the archive. So you always have an archive of all of your old project files throughout the entire project, and you can reference them at any time. And like if for some reason you make like a catastrophic mistake in like one of your edits, or like, I don't know, it's just nice to have everything archived, and like you can go back and see everything.
I'm
like
a
little
big
time machine.
Big fan of that too, in terms of like having multiple versions of your Premiere profile that you can reference back to. So if for some reason you know, your clients are like, we want to go back to the cut, you know, that we did back.
And it might be a little bit overkill because, you know, like I also do that within my projects.
Yeah, me too.
But I feel like you can never be too safe.
That's what I feel too.
I don't
know. I'm coming
like
back.
Just multiple archives, and like maybe that's just like an editing thing where you're just paranoid about losing your footage all the time. But
if you've ever I've lost a project, like back in college, I spent, I don't know, 30 hours working on this like music video, and then the file got corrupted, and I hadn't been doing any redundancies, and the autosave didn't work, and it was gone.
Yeah, it's exactly for that. If the autosave doesn't work, or like maybe your autosave is like saving to some weird spot on like some other hard drive that like maybe you just like forgot to set up your autosave, change your autosave. And you don't know where it is, or like you don't have that hard drive with you that day, or like you were working on a different computer, and like there's just a ton of different reasons why like just don't ever rely solely on autosave.
Yeah.
I guess that's the main reason why I do that.
Yeah.
Is like if for some reason like your project like just quits, like completely craps out on you, and you don't have autosave, or like you forgot to hit save, like at the very least you have the project from the day before, or like maybe there's like a more like there's just an updated version instead of having to go back like God knows how far. Okay, so in here we have our project, and there's a lot of bins set up already, and you'll notice it's pretty similar to like what's in the Finder. And so the first thing that we're gonna do is just drop in our raw footage, and I like to do that through Media Browser because which one is it? 45?
48.
48. I like to do that through Media Browser because sometimes like with RED files and like different cameras have certain
actually is
metadata.
You can't just, it works way better going through here.
Yeah, there's certain metadata that will come in better if you do it through Media Browser versus. And you're gonna take the raw footage and you're gonna import it, and sometimes it will tell you can't bring in everything, but that's okay. You probably don't need it.
So doing it through your media browser is just a good best practice for moving down the road. And like if you know, maybe with your current workflow and your current camera that you use all the time, you don't need to do that, but at some point you might, and then it's going to be, it's just going to work, right?
Yeah.
Instead of being like, why can't I import this footage from this camera, and like you freak out, just use media browser.
And some cameras even have like color profiles that they'll like have embedded in the metadata. Like the RED, I know like the RED cameras like have like a special thing that comes in with it.
Cool.
But yeah.
So that's a good good best practice to do, regardless of like if your footage doesn't need to go through that workflow.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna run into it probably at one time.
Yeah, and like one of the annoying things one thing I don't like about Premiere is how it has to conform everything. So this is sort of like taking over the phase of like, in Final Cut, you used to have to transcode everything into like one format, right? So everything was in ProRes 422. And so like in lieu of that, Premiere does this thing called conforming, where like you might have noticed like in the bottom corner, sometimes it's like doing all this like loading of every clip. Yeah. So that's kind of like its workaround for not having to have everything in the same format. So it's conforming it and making all of these cache files, which, by the way, if your computer is like all of a sudden like full, like your memory just becomes full, like a good thing to check is your cache files, and it's like in your library folder, like hidden somewhere crazy. But like it takes up so much space, and you really don't need to keep it. Like it's not gonna like mess up your project, except if you open it down the line, you'll have to like wait for it to reconform everything. But it's not gonna like mess anything up. But it's super helpful to like after you're done with the project, just go in there and delete everything, because it saves it on your actual computer hard drive unless you change the settings. And yeah, it takes up so much space.
I definitely ran into that exact situation one time where my hard drive filled up and I wasn't aware of that, and then I like did some research and I was like, oh.
And it's like 500 gigabytes like in this random hidden folder in your library.
Yeah, and it's from all the, and like you can do a setting, I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, you can do a setting in there that's like delete files older than like 90 days or whatever, and it'll automatically like kind of cleanse that out. But if you don't do that, then it just builds up, and then your hard drive is full of all this like useless kind of not proxy files, but sort of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It just makes your project run smoother.
Yeah. So while the import is happening, I figured I'd switch back to the full view, which you can do.
Don't want to just watch the import
yeah, because we're like in the
screen.
we're in the bottom like bottom corner right here during the other thing instead of watching the import. So why does that happen again? Because I've always wondered that you're just sitting there and that blue bar is loading in the bottom corner.
It's basically like, I don't know the exact like reason why it's doing it, but it basically is like creating all these like waveforms, and like my understanding of it is something along the lines of like, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, because I really don't have a concrete version, but like it's basically creating a version that can be read across Premiere, and like because sometimes you have different footage, and like they're all like different trans, so like some of them might be like H.264, some of them might be like MOV, some cameras even shoot directly to ProRes.
Right.
So like it's basically creating like a uniform file that can be read across in Premiere and allow you to edit faster, basically. Okay. Yeah.
Nice. Do you want to let's go back to your Finder structure.
Sure.
While my computer struggles to import this footage. And you can kind of break down what that all looks like and the folders, and make sure you click desktop here. Okay. And then, yeah, if you want to just
is it control tab?
Alt tab. Alt tab is like
I just am so scared of like pushing something that's gonna like blow up your computer.
It's like maybe you can walk us through the actual like editor template folder now.
Sure.
And just kind of like talk about these different folders you have and what you would put in each one and why they're there and all that stuff while we wait.
Okay, so we went over the footage folder already. And from client is just like, sometimes a client will have footage to give you. That's pretty self-explanatory. Stock footage, sometimes clients like to work with stock footage, and I usually put any stock footage that you download from anywhere here, and then like sometimes I'll even make like a folder of like watermarked and non-watermarked or whatever.
In the stock footage folder, let's say you had it from multiple resources, would you make folders inside of there to organize from the different resources?
Yep, yeah, and I would probably do by date first.
Okay.
Everything by date first. So like say you're looking for stock footage over the course of a week, like every day that you go in and look for new footage, I would like put in a new folder.
And then would you, let's say you had multiple stock footage, so you're using Adobe stock and you're using Story and Heart stock footage, and would you do a different folder for each resource and the date for every time?
I would do the date first.
Okay.
Always date first.
So it would be like
because
date
then
underscore
you're like, okay, I
Adobe
looked for
stock.
this footage on this day. Like, say you're like, oh, I remember I looked for that on this day, and you're like trying to buy it.
Yeah.
You know, like you're like, oh, I
Right.
feel like it was like Wednesday or something.
Sure.
That way, it's not just all in one folder.
Right.
Because like, and this goes for music too. And like sometimes for music, like I won't do like if it says it in the download name, like what source you got it from, I won't necessarily make like a separate folder for it.
Okay.
That's mostly like for music. Like it usually says like music bed in it
Sure.
or like whatever.
Yeah.
But it like I would do the date and then put in everything that you download on that day. That
Okay.
way you don't have to worry about like, wait, did I already listen to this song, or like did I already like put this in, or if when you're bringing it to the project, you just like drag the dated folder in to the music folder in your project.
Yeah.
And it keeps it super streamlined, and then you're like, okay, I know I already like worked through these tracks. Some of them are in the sequence maybe already. Some of them I haven't listened to, but like everything is categorized by date first.
Cool. So okay,
Yeah.
so you do that for the stock, you do that for the music.
Absolutely.
So-
That goes for pretty much everything.
Date. So
yeah.
you don't even have to watch this whole thing. All you have to do is put dates on everything.
And just do the date first. And then audio, we have music, sound effects, the mix, which is down the line, production audio. And like you can do these in any order that works for you. Like this is like a template that I got from a client that I worked with recently, and like I would probably make some tweaks to this. Like I'd probably put production audio first.
Can you talk about, so I understand what music is. I can go to an online resource and get
Yeah.
music, right? I understand what sound effects are, right? So those are the beep, boops, bops, whatever, right? But can you talk about the mix and the production audio? Because I think
Yeah.
that maybe those aren't as obvious in terms of what goes in there,
Okay.
especially for someone who's just starting out.
Sure. Yeah, so production audio is like what you record on set that maybe doesn't go direct into camera. So maybe you're recording on like a little Zoom or like a boom mic, and it's going into like a sound mixer, and those files are coming to you separately from the footage that you recorded. So that's stuff that you would have to sync up later on, you know.
Okay,
so
so
like
let's say I'm out filming, you know, in the desert, like the footage we're gonna have here, and I'm filming and everything, and then my buddy is walking around with a Zoom getting sound effects of like, or just gathering natural sound of like the crickets in the grass and all that stuff. That extra audio would go in production audio.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And like, or say like you forgot your lav and then you like had to record the audio on your iPhone or something, and it's something that you're gonna have to like sync up later on in the edit, then I would put that in production audio. And again, I would just do it by date.
Cool.
And then throw it in there.
So let's jump back to Premiere, import the drone footage, and then keep going through the folders.
Everything should be in here.
Oh, it's in there. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Do we want to
and-
finish up what we were talking, just the folder we were on, talk about the mix, and then we can come back here?
Yes.
Just so we're not jumping too much.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so the mix is what is going to be like one of the final steps of your edit, right? So you have like two finishing things, which is color and sound. And color is something completely different. I think you did a video on color recently, right?
Yeah, I actually sat down with Greg, which is her boyfriend, and he went through some advanced color grading with me in Premiere, and we can drop a link to that below.
Yeah, so there's two parts. There's color and then there's sound. And the sound is when you, in the edit process, are like all done with everything and you want someone to like, sometimes it's going to be you, so like maybe that doesn't really apply, but like
Sure.
If you have someone doing the sound mix and they're the person that's going to be like making sure all the levels are correct, and sometimes they'll do a little bit of sound design, and basically you're going to be like exporting something out to them and they're going to be exporting something to you. And then whatever they export to you, I would put in this mix folder right
So
here.
if you send your audio out and someone else is doing the final mix down of the audio, and they send you the clip back, you put that in the mix folder.
Yes.
If you're doing it yourself, not really.
Not really
necessary.
super necessary unless you're like doing it in another project, another program.
Okay,
sorry.
so if you're going to audition, you do a mix and
Yeah.
audition or something like that, you'd still put it in there even if you do it yourself, just to
Yeah.
make sure that's where it belongs.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and then the edit is where I keep all the project files. And like I said, like if I were to work on this tomorrow, I would just make a copy of this and then throw this one in the archive. graphic effects is what GFX stands for, and this is like for if you have an animator working on your project, or if you have someone doing like 3D titling or something, and mostly for like if someone's using, or if you are really good at this stuff and you're like doing After Effects stuff. I would put a project file for After Effects in this folder, and like the same thing about like date and archive applies.
So I have a question about this, right? So I'm gonna take the wheel for a
Yeah,
second.
go for it.
And if we do this and we go over here, I have a folder with a bunch of assets, right? And let's say I go into my graphics folder, right?
Oh my god.
I have all these, oh, you can't stand this, right? So I have all these like graphics, right? But they're not motion graphics. And let's say in this project we're working on, I want to use my end card.
That would go somewhere different.
It would go somewhere different.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these are assets that would be like animated or like open in another
So not like a still
No.
like overlay or anything.
Nope.
Okay.
Those would go in resources.
All right. Now we're in the resources right after.
And that would go probably either in logo or yeah, I would probably put it in logos.
Yeah.
As an end card.
And same with so I have like a little bug that goes in the corner.
I would do that in logos.
Or what about like a lower third?
Yep.
Same thing.
All in logos. And also, I mean, for stuff like that, you don't really need to do it by date because it's your stuff.
Sure.
But if you're working with a client, a lot of times there's going to be different versions. So I just tend to do it by date.
Yeah, I mean, that folder that I have on the other side is stuff that
Never
never change. It's just things I use all the time in my YouTube videos.
Yeah, and you can change this to be like, I don't know, something different if you want.
So
Whatever works for you.
Here's a question. So like, instead of taking all of these assets I have on the right-hand side that I use in all these different YouTube videos and making copy after copy after copy for every single YouTube video, I have this folder and I just reference and I link them. How do you feel about that? Because like,
you use all of these in every single video.
not all of them, but I basically like if I would not make a copy of these different assets for every single time because I know that they're always here. It's like a dedicated like home folder for my assets that I use for my videos.
Only issue with that is like if you're ever trying to make a final conform of your project to like give to someone else.
Sure.
It's not going to be there.
Right. So if I know that that's not the case for my YouTube content because I cut it here, I always make it here, and I always export it.
Yeah.
Then that could work. But if it's something that,
but like say for I mean I think like maybe in lieu of that it might be cool to have it on like a Google Drive.
I do have it on there.
Yeah,
like
perfect.
that's when we worked
exactly.
together. I was
because
like, I need the end card, and,
and you had it
my Google Drive.
and I think
right.
that's the most important thing is
Sure.
that you can like get it to whoever is editing it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I would have like a virtual, like a cloud version of that.
Nice.
And then whatever you use, I would put in that folder, like on it within the project.
Okay, cool.
Just so that it links up like seamlessly, no matter where you open.
The
like
media links.
yeah, like if you drag that folder to like another hard drive,
Right.
it will have everything self-contained in there.
Right.
And that's
okay.
super important.
And data is or storage is cheap now,
so cheap,
especially
and then,
for like a Photoshop file.
Oh, totally, yeah. And like I was saying, like as long as you have the virtual version, it doesn't really make it like that big of an issue because you can always access it and
Sure.
like download it and put it in the folder if you need it. Like if you open it and you're like, oh my god, it's missing it, because otherwise when you go to export it, it's just gonna have like a ugly thing in the corner
Right.
where it should be.
Right.
But as
So
long
in-
as you can get it.
So in here you have documents. What would go in the documents folder?
Transcripts from interviews, creative briefs, stuff like that.
Okay. And then
Logos is like any, if you were doing a thing for Google, it'd be like their logo. They a lot of times they have like different versions,
Right.
like different logos. They use fonts, any fonts that you use for like lower thirds or anything like that. A lot of times a client will provide you with a font. It's really helpful to keep the font in this folder because sometimes you go to like open the project on another computer even. Like if you're working in an edit house that has like more than one computer, and sometimes like the font isn't installed on all of the computers.
Yeah.
Which happens all the time. So like it's super helpful to have the OTF file in there. And then you can just install it if you need to.
I've run into that a million times.
Yeah,
the font thing is like,
it's
oof.
super annoying. Yeah. So actually, there is a separate folder here for transcripts. So documents would be like creative
briefs and stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah.
And then photographs would be photos that
Any
you
stills.
use in the
Yeah.
piece. Okay.
Yeah. Or reference photos. I don't know. Like I said, this is like a template that I got from someone else, but it's super similar to whatever I've used in the past. Let's see, that was the one that we just did. So grade has to do with color, so it's the same thing as GFX. It would be like the project file for DaVinci or something like that.
So you would be using that if you're going to color grade outside of Premiere?
Yep,
that
exactly.
Would be where you'd keep those project files.
Yeah, just if you're getting like stuff from someone else or
Right.
putting it out to someone else, so you have like 2 color from color.
Okay.
Output is your exports, and those are always by date, and we'll talk about that in the project as well, but like never name your file, like your export files by version, like ever, because I used to do that, and it's super, super confusing, because like a lot of times, and I'm sure many of you can relate, like you'll have like final, and then you'll have like real final, and then you'll have like real final 2, actually like this is the final, and like the names just get insane, and it's super inefficient and like not helpful if you go back to reference it later on. So if you just do everything by date, you don't have to name it rough cut, you don't have to name it versions, like just do by date. And then if you do multiple exports of the same the same cut in a day, then you can do like 01, 02, but nothing like version. You don't need to version it. As long as you have a date, you're good.
I love that. That reminds me of the Iceland surf film, which if you guys haven't seen the Iceland surf film, I published it like a couple months ago, and you should go check it out. But I think we had 40 we called it master cuts, and that was like supposed to be like the last one, and we got like to version 40, and it was just so ridiculous. Oh man, that was a ridiculous project, but that happened and it was terrible.
Well.
Never again.
Never again. It only takes a couple times to be like, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
And this I've found to be super, super, super helpful.
And it's helpful also when you, like I do a lot of stuff for my clients where I upload the files to, the internet, and if it's by date, then I know where I'm at in terms of the version, right? So it's like the newest one is the newest date versus being like, wait, which version was it that change was on?
Exactly. And then you can just reference it. And it should be the same name pretty much as your sequence. So then it makes it even easier to cross-reference.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'm just like connecting the proxies right now.
So I don't know. I don't think I did any C200 proxies. I think I did one.
Oh,
so
okay. So it's not worth it. Okay.
No.
Okay, cool.
But the drone stuff is proxies.
Cool. And to connect proxies, we already made them. Just go to attach. And then this is super helpful. So like the reason why I put it in the proxy folder is like make it really easy. It doesn't get confused in with your raw footage. It's in a different spot. So because they're going to be named literally the exact same thing except with like the word proxy at the end, it's really helpful to have it be in a different folder, I think.
No, I agree, 100%.
And because otherwise you're just not going to be editing off your proxies. And then there's like a proxy metadata thing that you can have appear, like you can search for it in here, and that will just show you
that it's attached and it's worked.
Yay. And this is like the best feature that has come out in Premiere, seriously. Like their proxy workflow is amazing. Like the fact that you can just click that button and go back and forth, it's insane.
Yeah, so maybe you can drop a clip in the timeline and just show that real quick. Not that we're going to get into proxies, but like
I'll do it when okay. So you have all your footage in here, right? So the first thing I would do, and this is basically like really good information if you ever want to be an AE or an assistant editor, because this is like what you're going to do. You're going to be setting up project files for editors. And I think it's super helpful to have an editor tell you like a great way that they like to have it set up for them. Because like there's nothing that makes me happier than like opening a project file from an assistant that's like well organized and like everything makes sense. And the biggest thing you want to make sure is just that like it's going to make sense for someone else.
Right.
When you're dealing with this. I feel, maybe a lot of you are like just editing all your stuff yourself, and like it's also really important to just know where it is like on a personal level, but especially if you're gonna have someone else be editing in your project. Like it's always like I feel like it's kind of the equivalent to having like a messy room, like if you want to have someone come over and like show them your bedroom or like your living room or something, you want everything to be like kind of nice and neat and like I don't know.
And if you are doing the solo filmmaker thing now, and you're just doing, or even if you're just doing it for fun and you're only doing it by yourself, if you keep making stuff, I promise you that you're gonna work with someone else at some point.
And you should.
Yeah, and working with someone else is amazing.
Yeah.
And you will look like a boss if you show up with your stuff like this. And then you're gonna have a situation like this where you ask them on your live stream, and then they teach you how to do it, right?
So the first thing I would do is go down to your working sequences, and that's where I keep like all of the sequences that we have for the project that we're going to be working with. And I would go down to 3, and that's going to be interviews and string outs, and I would just make a new sequence in there. Oh my gosh, this is going to be so embarrassing. Oh, it worked. Nice. Okay. And then I would name your sequence like the beginning of it before you get into the meat of what the sequence actually is, just the same as your project file. Outboard Desert. And then this is just going to be string out. And you just name it like exactly what it is. String out. And we'll do like the date of the string out. Not the date of like today, but what is being strung out. And we're gonna drop in all the footage from that day. So we'll do it by camera. So first, I'm gonna drop in all of the is it a C200 or C300?
C200.
C200 footage. And we have all the C200 footage here. And then I would honestly just go over, leave a space, and then I would do all the drone footage from that day.
So guys, for the project file, the way I had it set up on my website is not working, and thank you for pointing that out. So I'm gonna make another link right now so you guys can get the project file, and I'm gonna work on that while Gabby continues to share with you guys.
Cool. So in doing this, you're basically just like leaving a documentation for yourself of like a visual representation of what was shot on that whole day. So you can see it all here, and you're always going to have this to reference at any point in the edit. And because we're not going to like touch this, it's just going to be like there to reference and pull from if you need to. That way, like I found this is really helpful because if you're working with like a director or a producer, sometimes they'll be like, oh, like, are we missing footage from this day? And you can just go into your string out and be like, nope, this is literally all the footage. We didn't miss anything. Or maybe you did miss something, and then you can always have access to everything that was shot on that day in the sequence. So we're gonna make 2 string outs because there was 2 days, and again, I would just do it by day, like for the whole day.
Can you eject 45 real quick for me? Mm-hmm. It's in the bottom corner over here, that little up arrow. And then that, yep. Click that, and then it'll say eject 45. So I can grab, right above it, yep. So then I can get that project file from, or the template folder.
All right, so then I would just make another string out for the next day. Really? Backspace doesn't work as delete on here?
It does in certain scenarios.
Oh, man.
But there's a button right here that says delete on it.
I know. I used it. I found it. It's so good. Okay, so then we have our 2 string outs. And then, so this is where it kind of becomes dependent on what you've shot, right? There's kind of like a few different directions that this could go in. So usually if you just have like a bunch of B-roll and you're trying to make a montage or something like that, I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about like categorizing everything by scene, which is like the next step I would do. Let's see. So from here, you're gonna like leave these string outs completely untouched, and you're gonna make sequences that you can make selects out of. And if you had any interview footage here, you could take that out and put it into an interview sequence. Let's see. You said you had like a couple of clips, right?
Yeah, if you so like you can probably the stuff with the waveform. If you click above that, that's gonna maybe over here. That's a longer one. You could drop the resolution down. That's not one either.
It's
Yeah,
okay.
no, that is one
Yeah,
right there.
perfect.
So that's like two camera talking.
Yeah,
you
so
know.
like basically what I would do from the string out is, let's see the best way to explain this. If you have scenes in your project, like say you shot an interview and then you have like a bunch of different types of B-roll, right? So like, and a good example is like, say you were shooting a video about a biker, right? Like, you had an interview with them that you did, and then you shot like maybe a scene at their house of them like working on their bike, and then you also shot a scene of them like riding their bike through town, and then maybe you shot a scene of them driving. I would put all of those different scenes into different sequences so that whenever you're editing later on, you can reference them really easily. And you'd have like a whole sequence of just stuff of them driving, or just a whole sequence of stuff of them biking. And that way it's like really easy to reference, and you can mix up dates in that. It's just going to be all footage from like all the days that you shot of them cycling. And because you have your string outs to reference, you can always tell like which day something was shot on, if that's relevant or important later on down the line. So for this, like, I'll just show you an example of what I mean by that. So like, I'd make a new sequence in here. If I can figure it out. Okay. And this is just to save time. Nick. No, I'd actually put this in here, sorry. So this is where I would drop all the footage that I find throughout all the sequences of Nick talking to camera, and you know, there's going to be more than one, but for the sake of time, we'll just put in this one. Why won't it paste? Okay. So, I mean, you can kind of get a sense of that. So, like, it would just be, like, the whole thing would be footage of your either interview talking to camera or your subject talking to camera. And, like, if you have external sound that you need to sync up, I would do that in here as well. And so you can just really easily reference your interview sequence at any time. And usually this is going to be what you export if you're going to like get transcripts done. So like transcripts being like someone just writes down like all the words that the person says, and those are super, super, super handy to have for anything. Because then you can like cobble together different sentences from different parts of the interview, and you know. And this will reflect the time code in the transcript. And then, so like, if I were to go through this and make selects, I would leave this one intact and create a copy of it. And name it selects. Oops. And drop that in the selects folder. And so like, for this stuff, it's mostly gonna be B-roll stuff, and it's all pretty much the same place, like the same scene. So I would maybe just do like, I mean, if you really wanted to categorize it down, maybe do like, if there's different times of day, you could do like a morning sequence and then an afternoon, an evening, so you have like different lights to choose from, like times of day when you're doing the edit. It's basically all to just make it easier for you to pull from, so that you're not looking at like this massive string out of all the footage, and it can be kind of overwhelming. And so that's really useful when you're breaking stuff down. And then so like if I were to do selects on this, I would probably just like go in and like listen through the whole thing if I don't have a transcript, or if I have a transcript, like read through the transcript and then go into this and like make polls based off of, you know, like good sections that I like. And I'll do that by raising the clip, just so it sets it apart a little bit, and you can tell that that's like a good part of the sequence. And then I would start, you know, I would go in and make an edit sequence. And like, please let me know if you want me to clarify on any of this, or if there's something that I'm like talking through too quickly, or if it's confusing. So this would be the assembly, right? And I would just do the same name as the project, and like also the date. Today's date. And put that in edits. And in edits, I would also add a bin, similar to like the Finder workflow, where we have like an archive. So this is going to be an archive of all your cuts. So this makes it super easy, so you don't need to version anything. You're just going to literally do everything by date. And so like, just because today's the first day that we're working on it, doesn't mean that we necessarily need to name it rough cut or like pulls or anything like that. Like if you just keep it simple and like make it the date, you can always reference that later, and like you don't need to, it's not gonna be confusing down the line. And so like say I'm like, okay, this is a really good thing of Nick talking, so I'm gonna put it into, oh, I forgot to delete that. Okay, so this is our like edit sequence, right?
Can I stop you for 1 second?
Yeah.
Can you swap over to so we can see ourselves real quick? Yeah, the little guy right here. Click that and then click C200.
Yeah.
So guys, I'm gonna have to figure out how to get you the template project file in the long run. So if you're watching this after the live stream, I'll have figured that out. There will be a link in the description and a pinned comment where you can go get that, and it's free. But for now, just look in the chat and look at the comment, and you just send me an email, and I will send you the project file directly. So just hit me with an email right now. If you're watching this and you want the project file right now, just send me an email, and I will send it to you right now. And back to you, Gabby.
Yeah, so like, I mean, that's pretty much.
So make sure you swap back to the desktop, or yeah, hit desktop. Cool.
Yeah, so like this is just like a poll. So this is what I was talking about with the radio edit. So I would go through and like make selects from like this interview, and like pull them into the main scene or the main sequence, and just sort of like create a story based on audio first. And yeah, and then if you categorize all of your stuff into like scenes and everything, we didn't make proxies for this stuff, so it's gonna be kind of hard for me to do that. But basically, like, you can categorize. This is kind of where you can be creative with your workflow, whatever works best for you, and how it's gonna be easy to reference it later on down the line. So like maybe like it looks like there is footage here of like highway driving. Right? It's all upside down, but you guys get the point.
For the record, it's upside down because the shotgun mic on the top of the C200, like the way the monitor mounts in the shotgun mic, it just bumps into the ceiling of a vehicle when you're filming inside. So I literally have to flip the camera upside down so I can get the camera high enough to get a good shot. And like, yeah, you got to flip it in post, but like,
no, it's fine.
It's a little hack.
Yeah, totally. That happens, yeah, all the time. Totally fine. Yeah, so like just from like clicking through this really quickly, like it looks like maybe, you know, this is footage of them going on a camping trip in a really cool desert. Oh my God. Finn eating cicadas, which is so hilarious. But maybe like I would, for an example, like for this, I would maybe categorize it, totally depends on like the end objective of the video, but maybe I would categorize it on like footage driving to and from the campsite, right? And then have like a sequence of just all the B-roll of that stuff. So it's super easy to reference, and it's not gonna, again, like, it's not gonna be overwhelming looking for that stuff like on this massive timeline.
So if I stop you for 1 second, so originally this project was gonna be sort of like a travel guide for the Alvord Desert, because there's really not a lot of good information about that desert.
Okay.
And originally it was gonna be like, here are these talking points. I made an outline, and I was going to like talk about how easy it was to access the road, and like that would be to camera plus B-roll of accessing like the lake bed from the road, and then it would be like, are there toilets there? Like, because you're in the middle of nowhere, like there's no information, so I talk about, are there toilets? Yes or no. Here's the footage of the toilets, and like the
I would categorize it by those.
By like talking point.
Yep.
Right. So,
because it's something super straightforward, and this is where, like I said, like it totally depends on the project how you decide to categorize it. There's no like right way to do it. Like breaking things down from the string outs is like kind of dependent on a lot of aspects.
Right.
It depends if it's like going to be interview based, if it's going to be like what you're saying, like different talking points, then I would like break it down by that for sure. Or, you know, if it's just going to be like B-roll, then I would categorize it by however is easiest for you to access that B-roll later on down the line. So like,
so if we, just to clarify things, because I'm curious about this myself too. So if we did, so in this instance, right, and for the record, I'm not making this into a final video because it was ruining my vacation, and I didn't want to ruin it. So like it was kind of like super stressful for me to try to make something and also have a good time. So don't expect this to be like a guide to the desert. I'm gonna share with you guys some cool footage and stuff, but like that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So. But let's say that's the case, right? You have these different things. Would you make a new sequence for each talking point, work on that sequence, and like, you know, hone in like talking point 1, toilets, talking point 2, access to the desert, talking point 3, cell phone service, do you have it or not? And you would work out those talking points as their own sequence, and then take those and put them into a master that would be like the like it would be the whole film? Or would you, how would you approach that? Because I'm just curious, like, do you work on each section by itself first, or do you just work on the whole
do it
thing?
in a master sequence.
Okay.
I mean, you saw my master sequence. It's not always the most organized,
Sure,
but
sure.
like a lot of different layers of like video and stuff like that, of like trying things out. But no, I would probably just do it in like one master sequence and maybe do like slugs, which is
What's
either like an adjustment layer for. So I'll show you what that is.
We gotta switch back.
So like say this first point. So like what I would do is put all of the, like I said, like I would put all of the interview footage of Nick into this sequence, right? And like then maybe like when I'm going through and bringing it into like the master sequence, so like working edit, which is what this is, I would like go in and make an adjustment layer. If it's just for yourself. And just kind of like, just to like see what it says. So like you're like, access. And then maybe this section is about, oh, that's weird. Like the toilets. And then I would do that here. And just like to have like the different sections while you're working on them, and I don't know, that's probably how I would do it.
That makes sense.
And then if you wanted it to be like, so this isn't going to show up as anything.
So you're using that adjustment layer as
just
kind of
as like a label. Yeah, and you could even put it over the whole thing.
Cool.
While you're working on it.
That's really smart.
And you can like color code them, and it's not gonna like show up as anything over the video. So like if you did want to have it show up as something, maybe like if you're showing like a cut to a client or something, and they wanted to see like all the different sections broken down.
Sure.
I would put like a title card there instead. But like if it's just for your own personal use to like break it down by section, I would do this, and then you can like just color code it to be whatever you want, if that helps.
And then what about using, I feel like when we worked on the short film together, I saw that you had used, you basically took notes with markers.
Oh yeah.
Maybe you can talk about that a little bit in the same
so
sort
if
of
you
example.
If you don't have a transcript, my go-to, because you need to have something to reference so that you're not doing the same work twice, right? I mean, editing is all about efficiency and doing things as quickly as possible. So like, if you're gonna watch through footage, like, make it easy on yourself. You don't have to watch through it every single time. So like, say he says something like funny here about, I don't think I have the shortcuts set up for markers. So this is like a good line here. Like, I would write down in the comments like what, either like specifically what he said, or like good moment for the end, or like say.
And then how do you want to? Can you stretch that out? Is that how you?
Yep.
So you can actually see it.
You can, but I wouldn't do that.
No. Just leave it there. Oh, so you can scroll over and see that.
You can like hold Alt, or I forget what it is on a Mac, but you can do that. But the thing with that is that like you could have like multiple markers under here, and then they'll kind of cover each other up. You don't need to do that.
And you can just mouse over it and see what it says, and then
you can. And like what I actually do is like, so if you do like say like, and then you could do like, if you want to reference something specifically that he talks about, so it's like bad access to toilets. So there's like a really, really super handy markers tab that you can access. If it's not open here, you can find it in your Windows, and it's going to be right here in markers. And if I'm using markers, I will definitely have this open here to reference. And say like, and you'll notice also that I left the writing in the comments and not the name, because like what happens is if you write like something too long, talking to camera about access, blah blah blah. Okay. It cuts it off, so you can't see it all, and it's really annoying, and I've learned the hard way about that.
So you want to put it in the comments, and the marker note thing that you have here is amazing, and like I think what you said, you can search for certain
you can
words.
search. I was seeing if you can search, and you can search for what it says here.
Yeah.
But it's just not. It's not useful. Cool. Like, I would put anything here, and that way, like, you can literally, if you feel like it, you can go through and like, if someone's getting asked questions and you want to like write down like either a summary or like specific keywords that they say that you know you're going to think of later on. Because then when you're like, oh, like, and say you have a huge list here of like markers that you've gone through all of these things, then you're like, oh, I want to look for the clip where he talks about toilets. And then you can just click on this, and it will take you to that point in the clip. It shouldn't pop up like that, but yeah, it will take you to that moment in the clip. And if you have like an hour-long interview or something, this is super, super helpful, especially if you don't have transcripts. Transcripts kind of like take the place of this. And yeah, that's usually what I use markers for. You could also use this to like go through and mark B-roll if that's something that you feel like would be helpful for your workflow. For me, I tend to do this version of like lifting clips. That's just what works for me.
So in terms of the organization of the edit, the organization, the folder structure outside, we have the sort of the organization inside of Premiere here. Is there anything else you want to share? I don't want to get too far into how you are actually working in the project, because I think that we can make another video about that. And this, we've been live streaming for probably like a little over an hour now, or maybe a little longer, hour and 20. So I want to kind of wrap this up. But are there any other things that we missed, things that you think are valuable when it comes to organization, things that you haven't explained, or if you guys have any questions?
Yeah, if you guys have questions, let me
drop
know.
them in the
let me just look at my little thing that I had.
Oh, yeah,
Do you have that open still?
Yeah, totally.
I can see if there's
Right here.
anything.
Yeah, give that a look.
Like if you're going to, if you're working on the project with multiple people, maybe just add their initials to the project name. And or sequence. So if someone is like making selects on, if like say like you're collaborating with multiple people, and so you give this project to them and they make selects, maybe just like add your initials to it.
So for the record, SLX means selects,
Yeah.
and selects means the shots that you want, I guess, is the easiest way to put it.
Yeah,
So,
like the best clips.
yeah, like your favorite shot. So like when we worked on the documentary that we just made, which you guys should check out, I'll link it below. I probably already said that, but it was about like a drag queen. It was really cool. But anyways, like I went through the B-roll and like pulled selects of the performance and the slow-mo and gave that to Gabby because she didn't have time to do that because there was a time crunch. And like I was like, these are the shots that I like. So then you
Super
can
helpful.
put someone's
And
name
you can
on it.
either use, you can either leave it lifted like this, or if it's something where you know for a fact that, like for the performance, so like there was a performance at the drag show, and it was a bunch of slow motion, and we just wanted like the best of the best to throw together in a montage. And instead of leaving everything like lifted like this, I literally just took all the lifted sections and like smushed them down. So
Sure.
it was just a consolidated version of all the best shots that I could pull from.
Which, not that I think this is a good shortcut. Like if you have like, so maybe delete this clip, that clip, and that clip, and then so then select those two, and then go up to clip, and then go down to go to sequence. Sorry, and then go down to close gap. And then that's going to close the gap on those. And it's a super useful tool instead of going in, like I used to go in and delete each empty space like an idiot.
There's
Not
a
that
lot
you're
of
an
there's
idiot,
a
but,
lot
like,
of different ways to do that
little
too.
things. I'm sure there's a
Yeah.
faster way too.
No, actually, I think that's a new feature. I didn't know about
So
that.
close gap is a pretty cool way
Yeah,
to
that's like-
kind of get your things
get
done. if you
everything
need to.
together.
But yeah, so are there anything other notes that you think?
Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. But I think the biggest takeaway is to just like label everything by date. Yeah.
Cool. So are we? Do you want to switch back to the?
Yes.
Sweet. So thank you guys for tuning in. And as always, if you found this helpful, please share it with someone else who you think will also find it helpful. And before you guys take off, we're wrapping this up. If you don't mind dropping a comment, I know we've all been chatting in the chat, but drop a comment on the actual video. Let us know if you liked it. That's going to help other people see this. Give it a thumbs up. 16 people already did. That's fantastic. And I hope that you guys got some value out of this, and I probably will do some more stuff with Gabby if you think that's a good idea. Again, drop a comment and share that thought, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the future.
Bye.
Gotta click that end stream.